that to the computer. And here we go. So DJ had a question off the bat, I think. So
Amy, before we get started, do we want to do just a really quick round of introductions?
Yes. Thank you for that reminder, Staci. Yes. So let's do that. Let's get to know each other really quick, and maybe Staci can start.
Yes. So let's start with our name and where we're from, and if you want to mention something that you like to do for fun, to just throw that out there. I'm Staci Mauney, and I'm moderating today, and that's fun to me. And I live in Oklahoma City, but I'm originally from Rocky, Oklahoma, out in southwestern Oklahoma.
Oh, did not know that. So I'm Amy Lee. I am the author of Snow in Vietnam and the trilogy. Originally born in Vietnam. I am located in Edmond, Oklahoma. Just moved here in the summer of 2018, originally from Seattle. When we first came to the States as refugees. And I, for fun, love to cook. Who knew?
Yeah.
Winona, do you want to go next?
Yes, I'm Nona Cross. I live in Durant, which is just pretty close to the border of Texas, across the river. And I haven't been having a whole lot of fun lately because I had COVID and was in the hospital and did all that, but I'm back on track, I think.
I'm Dee Britt. I'm a physical therapist by day, writer by night, and been a PT for 36 years and born and raised in Oklahoma. So
awesome. Thank you, Dee. Kathy, do you want to go next?
Well, I'm Kathy Johnson, and I'm a friend of Staci's mom. I help out, volunteer at the senior citizen with our meals, and I live in Rocky, Oklahoma.
Okay.
And that's how I met Staci.
Well, welcome. DJ, you're not muted, so I'll have you go next if that's okay.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm DJ. I live in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, and I'm kind of new to the writing game, but I'm really wanting to immerse myself and learn as much as I can. For me, my favorite genres are memoir. So that's one thing that really interested me in this book, and nonfiction. That's what I like to read, and that's what I like to write.
Super. Frances?
Hello, I'm Frances Moore, friend of Amy's, also from Seattle, but I actually live in Peoria, Arizona, where it's hot.
Bless your heart. Yeah.
Right? And I think one of the favorite things I like to do is karaoke.
Really?
Yeah, they used to call me Amy Winehouse because that's all I sang was Amy Winehouse songs. So
well, we have time. We'll have to have you sing for us.
I don't know about that. Maybe a few more of these, maybe.
Love it. I think Catherine's our last person. Catherine, would you like to share?
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine. I live in Melbourne, Australia. I was born in Vietnam, and I'm having a great time reading the book. In my spare time currently, I'm helping out at my local community garden, so have been busy doing that. Thank you.
Nice. Welcome. What time is it in Australia?
It's just past 9 a.m. Monday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Wow. Wonderful. Well, before we get started, I really want to do a quick intro of Staci Mauney, who decided to say yes to my inquiry of her hosting and moderating tonight. Thank you so much. So Staci holds a Master of Education in Secondary Education from Cameron University and a Bachelor of Arts in English from Southwestern Oklahoma State University, SWOSU. She grew up in Southwestern Oklahoma, now lives in Oklahoma City. She enjoys taking her sassy Yorkie companion, Lily, who is so cute, for long walks, volunteering, and serving on the executive board of the Oklahoma Writers Federation, which is OWFI. And she runs a freelance editing business, Prestige Prose. She has written 4 devotionals and maintains a weekly blog in her Echoes of Joy series, which I just bought, and I think I need to buy one for me. I bought one for my mother-in-law, but I didn't buy one for me. So Staci, we'll
have to fix that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Staci, for coming.
Thank you, Amy, for having me.
I'm really excited that you're all here. So thank you so much for your support. And I know DJ's got a question which I want to address right off the bat, and then we can go into our book study. So DJ says, good afternoon. Regarding last week's discussion, I wondered why the original cover was a problem. I remember that you wanted it changed later on. Why were the differences between the 2 covers? So you see the cover behind me, which is what it looks like now, which also Winona has, I think. And this was the original cover, which is not too different, as you can see. I know the background is kind of weird looking. So the contention was that this cover did not look historical fiction, and it did not, it was too frou-frou, I think. It just, you know, a lot of the covers have different layers, different photos embedded or layered on top of each other. And usually when you look at book covers, at least the professional traditionally published covers, they have at least, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7 images that are all combined together and layered on top to give it some depth. And being that I didn't know what I was doing, and, you know, being a first-time debut author and deciding to self-publish instead of going the traditional route, all I knew is that I wanted this model. You know, I looked over thousands and thousands of photos, I feel like, and before I finally settled on this one, because I was like, this represents Vietnam, this represents my mom. It's also kind of a purple ao dai dress, which is my mom's favorite color. But if you can see, like, the font and the background, it's very one-dimensional. And anyway, so I liked the font style, which is a Cinzel and Cinzel decorative. But again, it was just one of those things where the person that I was working with, they just didn't agree with the cover. And I should have listened, honestly, because I love the cover that I have now. And
Yes.
I think it's just, you know, I was young and naive and just didn't know any better. So for that, I apologize to that one person. They tried and they meant well, but I was just stuck in my ways. So there's that. Good question.
Yeah.
In
the new cover, well, the old cover, what was the lettering up higher
Well,
than it is in this one?
It's higher. It's in blue, which is also hard to see, I think. And it just wasn't crisp enough. So I think, and, you know, the other thing too with the second cover is at that point in time, I had found out that I had just, I was a finalist in the Pacific Northwest Writers Association writing contest for a debut historical fiction. And so I slapped that on because somebody told me, well, you should put your awards on there. And that was the only award I had at the time. So, but I wasn't going to go back and, you know, change the cover a third time. It was just, I was ready to move on. And so that's the cover we have. And that's what we're going to stick with until maybe a traditional publisher decides to pick it up and change it. Yeah. Or we get a movie deal. Let's hope for that.
Yes.
Well, it's good enough to have a movie deal.
Thank you. That's my hope. You know, I've always wanted the Vietnamese diaspora on to mainstream or like I look at, you know, I used to love Miss Saigon, the Broadway musical. And now I look back at it and I was like, you know, that the score was great, but the actual storyline sucked. And I think it sucked because, you know, it was very focused on the GI coming to the rescue. And it really portrayed the Vietnamese heroine or the protagonist as helpless, and all she was
Mhm.
I mean, she was in a situation where she was a sex object and a fetish object, I guess, very much womanized situation. And so, I hope one day that Snow in Vietnam or some story like that hits mainstream to really showcase what the Vietnamese diaspora story is all about. So there's that. Hello, Jenny and Dan. We just did a little round of introductions. Would you mind introducing yourself and where you're located and what you like to do for fun?
Well, I'm Jenny.
I'm Dan.
We like to do this for fun. This is absolutely amazing. Thank you for having this tonight so we could attend. We're from Maine.
Cool.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's so beautiful, Jenny.
Oh, thank you.
Dan does too. Dan, you look so beautiful.
Yeah, okay.
All right, well, do we want to go ahead and dive into the book study? And I've got some questions for the audience, some for Amy. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to speak up or put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we try to get an answer. So my first question is an audience participation question. So you can type your answer in the chat, but if you want to unmute yourself, if you're muted and speak up, please do. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is that we've seen that Snow is a dreamer, and Mrs. Tran has tried to wake her up. And at the end of chapter 5, Snow becomes the realist and Mrs. Tran the dreamer. How did you feel about this transformation in Snow's personality? And how did you feel about her confronting Mrs. Tran about the possibility of her son's death and Mrs. Tran's reaction to that? Would anybody like to dive into that?
Whoa.
Yeah. Whoa.
Was that too difficult to start?
I'll just say that to me that's the one of the most amazing things from I'm about at 20, I think I'm on chapter 21, and I'm kind of losing track on where the chapters start and end, but to me that's just what keeps you coming back, is just the courage and the just the ability to believe you could get on that boat and take your little baby, and the whole thing is just like, I try to put myself in that position. I think, okay, if it was inverted, and the only way for my baby to survive was to get on a boat that was not very reliable. You have no contacts, very little money. The only thing you have is a dream and courage. That's what, to me, that was like, I was kind of interested. And when that happened, it was just like, okay, I'm really interested.
Yeah.
At that point. It's like, so.
Well, in the beginning too, with Snow, she just was passive and not writing passive, but she whatever, I'll do whatever you say, blah blah blah. And then she met Sam and fell head over heels in love with him. But Mrs. Tran was the one that was telling her, just get out of your head, basically. And that's when Snow decided that this is what I'm going to do, and she did it. But and the arranged marriage thing, and him already married, I thought she was pretty ballsy to go back to that toy store and buy the same toy airplane. I loved that.
That's I would be curious. Wouldn't you be curious if you were in Snow's situation and you're like, who's this person that's holding my husband's hand? And, fuck yeah, I'm going to like throw this in her face. It's funny you asked that, Staci, because I never really thought about it either. You're an author, you just write your story and you move on. But I think it's easier to be a dreamer yourself and not really self-reflect and see what's going on in your own life because you're so close to your emotions and what's going on, right? So it's easy to point someone else's flaws or what, point out the fact that they're the dreamer and you're not the dreamer because you got your shit together. So it's very interesting that you point that out because yeah, Mrs. Tran, in her she's very hopeful. She loves her sons. She lost her husband due to a bombing at the radio station by the Americans. And so that's all she has left is that hope that, okay, the war is going to end. My sons are going to come home and everything's going to be great again. But at the same time, I wonder if she's reflecting on her own misgivings and the mistakes that she's made in the past. And she's kind of, right, slapping Snow around like, wake up, child. Don't make the same mistakes I made. So I love that question.
I also think that sometimes, people adjust to their situation and their surroundings, and what may not have worked at one point now works for something else. But you kind of have to figure out your path on which direction you're going to go. So I think that some of that may have come into play with that too. So.
Mm-hmm. But it was a nice position too, because, in real life, that's kind of what happens. We surround ourselves with people who are similar and different than us and hopes for growth. And so while Mrs. Tran gave Snow that extra edge that she needed to become a little bit more hard to be able to do the things that she needed to do, and Snow's character made Mrs. Tran a little bit more soft, which is probably something she needed.
I think that's the two of them definitely play on each other and gave each other their strengths for their vulnerabilities. And keep in mind, Snow was the youngest of 7 children, so she had always been spoiled. And that's just the way it is in Vietnam too. The youngest always gets away with everything.
Not just in Vietnam.
Well, yes. I'm the only child. I don't know anything, but yeah, the youngest child, right? They get along, they get everything. And with my mom, with Snow, she had everyone cooking for her and looking after her, and she got away with everything. So there was no need to grow up until the war was coming to a close.
So is your family's history, is that the reason that Snow was a lousy cook? Because she was waited on?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. She was always and my mom was always into having fun, and she went to college, to the university in Saigon to get away from the family, get away from the responsibilities. She was just the opposite of everybody. My mom, she loved to learn. She loved school. She didn't like to live and grow up, right? And she wanted to be different. She became a Catholic, and even though everybody was Buddhist, and she didn't mind that she was interested in other men besides Vietnamese men, right? The French and the American men interested her more, actually. So yeah, my mom was just different. Did anybody else?
She was pretty nice.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
It sounds like she wasn't really a nice person.
That she was a nice person or wasn't?
Yeah. Was. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, my mom was very, very, very sweet. I don't think she, it's so funny. She never raised her voice. She was very firm at times, and she had to be, but she never lost it and yelled or went nuts or anything like that. More than anything, she would internalize and bring it inward. But yeah, that's always been my mom. Very, very, very sweet talker.
Well, that was some good discussion. So does anybody else have anything to add before we move on to the next question? Okay. Well, let's look at chapter 6. And it was a very powerful chapter detailing Snow's attempt to leave the country during the fall of Saigon. My question really is very general. What did you think of this, and what kind of emotions did it bring up in you that you feel comfortable sharing with us?
Yeah, chapter 6 was the fall, which was April 29 and 30. So as we know, April 30th, 1975 was the fall of Saigon. And we call that Black April, by the way, which is coming up real soon.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
Well, I do. I was a young mother and wife when all that happened, and and then Vietnam, the war itself was just a part of our lives, and and we worried about people and did all that. But the news reels of the people just on the rooftops. I can remember those, and you mentioned them. You wrote about that. People just scrambling, and as a matter of fact, the first chapter, the title "Ant Spiders," I thought it was going to be about that, about all of the people just pushing and shoving and trying to get into a helicopter.
Yeah, and I actually thought about where I was going to start my book, what chapter or what scene, right? And that would have been a natural place to start it with all that chaos. But I didn't want to do too many flashbacks because I was told that's not that's not a good thing to do. Because I don't want to confuse people with the flashbacks. But the other thing that I started off, which now I kind of wonder maybe I shouldn't have, was the scene where she was looking at herself in the mirror, and she's about to get married, and she's starting to kind of worry about what the future holds. And that's another thing that I learned is, you don't start your books with that type of scene, where you're just going through the regular rigmarole of day-to-day living. You want to start right in the middle of an action. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I got 30 rejections from editors and agents when I did this pitching and querying. But the fall itself, I researched a lot about this when I did this a few years ago. I wanted to know, what was it like after the tanks rolled in and the helicopters left, and because you still had the Marines there. The U.S. pulled out in 73, but there were still people on the ground. There were still press on the ground covering, and I was really, really shocked. That's one of the things that I learned when I wrote that scene, and when I learned about the fall, was that things really didn't change. It wasn't a stark thing, Yeah, helicopters left, and I didn't realize that they didn't grab everybody either. I thought everybody who was in the embassy got to get on that helicopter and leave. So I was very, very surprised to find out that hundreds were still left there, hopeful, waiting and waiting and waiting, and then they realized the Americans aren't coming back. That was actually a really hard chapter to write, because I had to envision my mom and me, as a child, what she was going through and what so many people were going through, desperately trying to get out of the country, because they were fearing the unknown. So go ahead.
Catherine has a comment. She says, my parents were still living in Saigon in April 1975, and they never talk about it. My mom's favorite cousin was killed 2 weeks before, and she always laments the timing of his death. But other than that, they don't talk about it. And then Catherine says she should ask them about it one day. Did your mom talk about it, Amy?
Nope. Yeah, every time I tried to ask her questions about the past, it was, and I think a lot of you know this already, it was a deflection situation where, it's, hey, look what I bought at the store today, or what's for dinner, or and she'll remember the good things and talk about the good things and the happy memories. So, but I know that she felt the pain because
Yes, yeah.
yeah, I mean, she lost a lot of friends and a lot of family members, and um, she was clearly old enough to remember and understand what was going on. So I really wish I knew, and that she would share more, but I can understand the trauma, and um, I mean, I just can't imagine what it's like living during that time frame. I mean, can you imagine if our country was communist and everything was dictated
Yeah.
by our government and we had no democracy, I mean, our property, our resources, everything, is owned by the government. And if you speak out and say anything bad and negative, you might find yourself gone, disappeared.
Yes.
So it's scary.
I
And
think all of us have something in our past that we don't want to talk about. And it may nothing as big as fall of Saigon maybe, but still there's something. Just
yeah,
it,
yeah,
it's just down here,
yeah, big or small, we all have our little secrets or our little, traumas that we
Yeah.
didn't want to share.
Amy, that little bit you're talking about at the embassy, I actually went back and read that a second time because I thought I missed something. It's like they didn't get, they were left, So it was, that was one of the more impactful parts for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, and during that time, there were helicopters not just landing on the roof, they were landing in other parts of the embassy to get people out. And one of the things that they did was they tore down the huge tamarind tree that was in the courtyard, to make room for
Mm.
for these helicopters. And meanwhile, there's chaos, right? Because the government officials are like burning all these documents, trying to get rid of any evidence or any paper trail, of what's going on, so that doesn't get into enemy hands or the communists, the Viet Cong. And you still have bombing. I mean, the Viet Cong are taking over, so their tanks are rolling in. They're trying to rocket the airports and just stopping all exits. So it's a little bit chaotic, and I think we've all seen those videos with the helicopters on the embassy and people struggling to get over the gates and just desperate to leave. Whew, that's heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add to that?
I mean, I can't imagine, like, I think about, as a parent, you spend your whole life pretty much just trying to protect your kid, and I can't imagine just trying to think about like how you protect your kid, yourself. Like, there's just so many cards stacked against safety. And I mean, I don't have words other than I can't imagine. And, when I read that chapter, that was probably one of the chapters that I sobbed at in my living room, and just my gut was in knots. And, it's hard to think about, but necessary, but hard to think about what everybody went through.
Yeah, I cried writing that scene too, because one of the things that I did when I wrote that scene was to listen to the national anthem of the South Republic of Vietnam. And so when you listen to to that national anthem in Vietnamese and you kind of understand what they're fighting for and what they're singing about, just it really hit home for me anyway. And so as I was writing that and it's so weird, like I'm listening to this song, I'm writing the story, I've got my computer open and I'm like researching like the actual what's going on, watching these documentaries. It's like all that emotion just flooding into that one chapter. It was definitely, I mean, I feel like all my chapters were a little bit heavy, but that was kind of the turning point, right? Because now you really get into the meat and potatoes of the story of why they were leaving the country.
Catherine has a comment. She went to Vietnam with her mother a few years ago. She says, we did a few tours, including one to the DMZ, and our tour was full of Americans, and some were children of Vietnam vets. Many were crying, but my mother was just running around happy and taking photos like a spectator. We were the only ones not crying.
Demilitarized zone. That's what DMZ is, in case you didn't know. So that's interesting, and it's actually not surprising. So the Americans, I think a lot of the Americans that I talked to, they felt guilty, right, of what happened, what their contribution or no contribution was, and to be back in Vietnam after all those years and to be welcomed and forgiven by the locals and by the Vietnamese, that brought closure and joy to their hearts. I've spoken to many Vietnam vets who just won't go back to Vietnam because they're afraid of the reception. And the ones who do go back to Vietnam are just, peace just is, overcomes them, because I'll share one example. One of the Vietnam vets that I talked to, he said he went to Vietnam, checked into a motel or hotel, and the receptionist says, "We forgive you, it's okay." And he just cried.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's all it took, And when I go back there, all the tourist agents who are giving these, boat tours or bus tours or whatever, they are so grateful to the Americans and the Westerners for giving them a sense of what life could be like back then, but also to come back and give them a job. I mean, tourism is huge in Vietnam, and without that tourism, there'd be so many starving people and homeless people in Vietnam. And so they're so grateful for the tourists and the Americans and the Westerners who come and want to learn about the culture and the history in the country. So, but and for the Vietnamese who leave and come back, there's actually a term for those people. Viet Kieu is what we call them. We come back, and some of us don't know what, some of us like me who, I was young and I come back and I'm just a tourist because I'm excited to be in a new place and I'm taking pictures and I'm running around and like everything is, I'm in awe. And then you have the older generation who come back and they're just, I'm sure, overwhelmed with the memories that flood back, but also happy because that's their home, that's their country, that's the motherland, and to survive, to be able to come back is a huge, huge deal. So
it's really amazing. Anything else before we move on?
I have one question, Amy. When you were talking to Vietnam vets and Vietnamese people as for part of your research, did you talk to anybody that was part of the baby flights that were getting babies out?
No, actually, I didn't meet anybody. I thought you were actually going to go down the path of, did I talk to any VCs or anybody who fought on the northern side, which I did. And that was kind of scary. On one of my trips to Vietnam, and I did the whole Airbnb and stayed with host families and stuff. And one of the families did fight for the North. And I had to tread very carefully because I just, there's still fresh wounds there. The nice thing is that there's a lot of forgiveness and understanding that it was a war and we did what we had to do, or they did what they had to do. But there's no hard feelings anymore, which I was very happy and surprised to hear and see, because, you know, the North and the South, even though there's a little bit of, you know, it's kind of like a brother sister argument kind of thing, but they still have their contentions, and they just don't talk about it. They just move on. And now they live, for the most part, peacefully together. And there's no ill will against the Americans or any of that either. So they've come a long ways. We've come a long ways. So.
Okay, and
Wow.
speaking of all of that, in chapter 7, we meet Mrs. Tran's sons, and one fought for the North and one fought for the South. She is so excited to see them, and we've talked a little bit about how she softens around them. She's just like a different person around them. What do you think about that? Does that remind you of anybody you know? And when you think about that scene where she's greeting her sons, and one we see is hauled away for is it re-education? Is that what it's called? Where do you think her allegiance stood in that political climate? Do you think she took sides, and how was she able to do that? Or did she? What do you all think about that?
I think that she welcomed them home regardless if they were North or South, because they were her babies. It's like Jenny said a while ago, your babies are your life, you know. So that's
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think a mother's love for their child supersedes anything. And regardless of, you know, which side they were on, she was just so happy to have them there. Even though, you know, just to have them there. Love conquers all, basically.
yeah, it does.
Well, and it's kind of like, you know, no matter what you do for work, a living, a role in any capacity outside of home, when you come home, you're that child, that brother, that mother, that father, whoever you is at home. They came home and they were her boys, and that was kind of
Interesting, because, you know, she did live in the South. She lived in Saigon. Do you think, now here's the thing too, is like, you know, she could have been siding with the South because she lived in the southern part of Vietnam, but she could also have been one of the Viet Congs who had their allegiance to the North, but lived in the South as an infiltrator kind of thing, right? They're sympathizers. So we just don't know. She's kind of that amoral anomaly. And then her husband was killed by the Americans. So she could have also sided with the North, right, and hated the Americans. I don't even know the answer to that question.
I think you have had,
on other than the motherhood side. I don't know.
Stacy, you have come up with some fantastic questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. That one was a combination of one of mine and one Amy sent me. So I can't take all the credit for that one.
But I felt like that was a huge curveball. I never saw that coming. I'm like, oh, is that even a possibility? Okay, well, figure that one out. Yeah.
I remember thinking when I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, which way is she gonna go? I mean, that just kind of like kept my attention, because I wanted to find out more. And I think I was in bed trying to go to sleep. So I probably didn't get sleep till like 2 or 3 in the morning, because I had to find out which way was she going.
I agree.
Oh my gosh. So I'm just reading Catherine's comment there. What did you say? My husband dated a woman in his early 20s. She was adopted from Vietnam to Australia. She is half Vietnamese and half African American. She was a tiny baby at the time, and they said she arrived in a box like a doll. This is in reference to what Winona Cross asked. I don't know much about these baby flights. Yeah, there was a lot of, well, I don't know if there was a lot, but there was definitely Operation Baby, what was it called?
Baby lift.
Yes, and I think during World War II, that was the case too. And interestingly, you said that about half Vietnamese and half African Americans. That was a huge, huge problem in Vietnam with the GIs and the military spending their time in country, getting to know the locals, enjoying, the flavors of the locals. and and then when they left, or if they died and got killed in action, they left so many babies behind. And the ones who were half, that were mixed, grew up with a very difficult life. The kids who were left behind, nobody wanted them, and they weren't full, they weren't Vietnamese, and so they ended up in orphanages or homeless, just scrambling to make a living, which nobody talks about that. And I hope, actually, I know someone who's going to be writing this story, and that's Nguyen Phan Quay Mai, who is the author of The Mountains Sing. Her second book is about the half-breeds that were left in Vietnam. So I hope you all read that, because that's a story that I don't think has ever been told, and it's a story I don't really know much about, but it definitely needs to be told. She was born in 1975, but they don't know her exact birthday. Yeah, and that's very common. We don't keep records of birth dates and all that stuff, or they get lost. This is a very different session than the first session. Wouldn't you all agree?
We're having some really great discussion here.
I'm
really enjoying this.
And I love it because, and that's one of the beauties of different moderators, because you get different styles and perspectives. So I would love for someone to moderate the next week's session and see where that goes.
Well, it looks like Frances might be volunteering.
Frances, yeah, you're my girl.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
I did see recently, probably Facebook, but I'm not sure, of a man who was in Vietnam as a GI, was talking to this Vietnamese waiter in a restaurant, and they got talking, and the waiter said, I was on the baby lift, and he said that man started crying because he was actually seeing and hearing a baby that he very well may had on his lap. And that just, I'm a retired labor and delivery nurse, so babies are kind of thing, but but that seeing that on Facebook, it was poignant, and I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, and I see that too with C-suite, where all these refugees who are on boats in the middle of the South China Sea, and they get rescued, and then years later they get reunited with the naval officers or the crew that rescued them. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I wish we kept better records, because I would love to meet the people that came into my life that had a hand in it, especially the BOLAGs and the IRC, the refugee committee, that brought us to America.
Amy, do any of the babies or children, would they get adopted, or somebody adopt them?
There's a lot of that. There's actually, surprisingly, there were a lot of minors that traveled alone. And they ended up in refugee camps in their own barracks, where they kept all the unaccompanied minors together. And they do get adopted, which is beautiful to see. But
I've got
I can't imagine traveling on your own. You're just such a desperate parent that you'll just throw your child onto a boat and hope they make it, or send them with, a neighbor or a great uncle or something. And yeah, those are
And I think that is still so relevant today. I saw a story on the news, I think it was just last week, of a little boy. He was like 10 or 11. He was down wandering around the border. He had gotten separated from his group. He was not with his family or anybody he knew even to start with. And then he got separated from the people that he was with. And one of the border guards found him and was trying to help him. So I think that story of the refugee, the immigrant, is still so relevant right now.
Yeah, I saw that story too. I'm kind of on the other side of the story, sort of. So my father was in the Navy, so he was all over the place. Korea, Vietnam, Philippines, Germany. I can't even remember all the places. But because of him being Papa was a Rolling Stone, I'm now one of 14 children that we know of so far.
Goodness.
So we're still trying to find the rest of them. That we only have clues from old movies that my mom saw. So I'm in the same boat with you, Amy. I keep asking her questions, and obviously it's really painful. She doesn't want to talk about it. So I have to figure out which mood she's in is the day that I go after her and I start asking her more questions. Because as of probably a year ago, we were only up to 12. Now we're up to 14. And they're all of different nationalities. So yeah, it's hard to find. And I know that I believe I do have one in Vietnam.
Wow.
A half sibling there. So it's kind of a different take on it. I'm on the other side, but so I get it. Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's cool. I mean, it's very interesting, Francis.
It is.
Thanks.
Francis, you need to write a book.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you piece your story together and figure things out. And then what you don't figure out, you just make it up like I did.
Well, actually, I kind of learned that from the last meeting we had last week, because you were saying something and bells were going off in my head. I'm actually in the process of writing like 5 different books all at the same time. But every time I wake up, I come with a different title. And therefore, there's another book. So
it's not easy writing a finished
No,
book.
it's not. But you've been giving me some really good ideas on how I'm going to start this and which direction I kind of want to go and what I want to do with it. So thank you for having these, because it's really helping me out. Of course, I started writing my books before you even started your first one. So I'm a little jealous.
Well, I know a couple of publishers.
Yeah, I know, right? Awesome. I just got to finish one. Just one.
So I'll give you a couple of tips. One, and this is something that my stepmom told me, Lynette, who married my dad at the same time she was married to that my dad was my mom. She told me that as a writer, to never tell your story to anybody. And the reason why is once you get it off your chest and tell that story, the need to write it is gone, and then you'll never finish your book. So keep that close to you. The second thing I would say is if you're trying to ask questions from the people who can contribute to your story, sometimes it is traumatic, obviously. So find a different approach. Have them write it down, have them record it, have them, do whatever makes them feel comfortable to share that story, so that you can get that piece of information. I'm trying to pull teeth from my dad, what's the story, or what's the saying when you're trying to pull teeth from a chicken? That's my dad, yeah, right? Mong yo, dirty butt. That chicken doesn't have any teeth. And so I've given him, a journal to write in, and I've like, I'll record it. You record it. Here's a recorder. Just tell your story, and then I'll take it from there. I've invited him to my house and try to loosen him up, and get him to talk a little bit. And but every single time it's like he'll break down, shut down, and then that's the end of it. So Francis, I mean,
Yep, I've been working on it for about a year now, and little by little she's starting to tell me stuff, but she's kind of testy. So
Yeah.
I have to know when to cut it off, and then I have to kind of work into it, maybe 3 more conversations later, and I'll bring up something and I'll get her talking again. And man, you got to see me. I got a whiteboard. I'm just writing down everything like crazy. And I have a recording app on my phone so that it records all my phone calls. So if I miss something, I still got it.
Oh, I have that too. And it's so sneaky, but I do it because I'll just like, do, and then I'll turn on the recorder. And then I gotcha.
Yep. It works. It works. And especially when you have, a situation like this where you're trying to get data from someone, they just talk so fast sometimes, or you miss one little thing. Like she told me that somebody died, and all I could get was dead and the date, but I never got the first name. So I have the date. So at some point I'm going to have to go back to her and ask her, what happened on that date? Why do I have this date written down, to try and get her to tell me the name. Mm-hmm. So I just have to be really sneaky with my mom, but it's frustrating that, that generation doesn't want to talk and they don't want to share. And I understand, that there were some very, very painful memories. Just wait till you guys read my book. But anyway, some very, very painful memories. And it's hard to talk about it. But, you would think that they would want their children or the next generation or somebody to hear their stories. So kudos to you, Amy.
Well, good luck, Francis.
Thank you. I'm going to need it.
Welcome back, Staci.
Thank you. Sorry about that. What a time for that to happen. The internet decided to flake out, but it came right back up, thank goodness. So I think we have time for one more question. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the themes of the novel. It's set against the backdrop of the Vietnam War, and we see a lot of universal themes such as survival, war, family, suffering, deception. When you wrote this book, Amy, did you have all of those themes in mind, or did they just kind of come along naturally as you wrote about the various situations?
So I'm a pantser, not a plotter. I write by the seat of my pants. So all that just came together, thank God, naturally, I guess, the way it did. I mean, honestly, I didn't think I would have 3 books at this point in time, right? When I quit my job back in 2017, it was to take time to reassess my life and to mourn and figure out how I was going to honor my mom. And I just wrote, I obviously joined a lot of conferences, writers groups, took modules and workshops and training and all that stuff. And learned a little bit about, obviously I learned a little bit about themes and character development and all that stuff, but learning it from a textbook point of view versus actually writing and hands-on, totally different experience, right? And I just am thankful by the grace of God that it all came together the way it did, and it was just meant to be. So great question.
I'm glad it happened.
Thank you. And if there are any more questions that we didn't cover tonight, please save them for next week, and feel free to send them to me, and I'll send them to Francis, who graciously agreed to moderate next week. So thank you. And so we'll keep this going until we don't want to do it anymore. But I'm really appreciative of you taking an hour out of your time on Sunday to spend it with Staci and me. So God bless you. And Kathy, I'm so excited you're on board. I can't believe you're already on, what was it, chapter 18 after getting the book how many days ago? 2 days ago? 3 days ago?
Well, the first day that Staci brought me the book, I got home, and the more I looked at the front of it, the more I wanted to see what it was about. And I read the acknowledgments, all of it. from the very beginning to where I'm at now. And it's like I said earlier, once you get started, it's hard to put it down. So I would stay up until 11:30 at night reading because I love to read. And it's an amazing book, and it makes you think of how very fortunate that we are over here, that we have so much freedom and things that we can do to raise a family. And I'm just glad that I got to meet you wonderful ladies.
And gentlemen.
And Dan.
And Dan, yeah.
He's one of the girls.
Yeah.
And Francis, if you don't mind, I've got a daughter that lives not over in Arizona.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not too
How
far.
are you from there?
I am North Phoenix, literally.
Phoenix?
Uh-huh.
She lives in Surprise.
Oh, actually, we're right next door to each other then.
Well, fantastic.
It's a small world.
Networking.
I know, right? Yeah, it's North Phoenix, like Glendale, and then Peoria,
Right.
and then Surprise.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm in Peoria.
So before we go, I want to show you one picture, which I promised last week and I couldn't find it, and I found it. So
Yay!
Yay. So let me share my screen really quick and I'll show you the picture. And I'll tell you what we're sharing here. So I think this is the one.
And Amy, I'm looking forward to reading your other books.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. So can anybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this was the slide that I wanted to show you. And last week I talked about my dad, who was married to Lynette, and they had their baby here in Vietnam. That's them. And then in the center here are books that my stepmother wrote. So A Friend for Carlita, The Golden Carp, and these are folk stories or folklores. The Brocaded Slipper, Sky Legends of Vietnam. So Lynette, and you can see over here, she was an author, and there's a picture of her signing someone's shirt, autographing. Yeah, autographing a fan's shirt during a book signing event back in 1982. So wow. I thought that was pretty cool, and I had never shared that picture or these pictures before, actually. So you get to see that as part of the book club, book study.
That's a cute baby there.
Yes, that's my oldest half brother, Tim. And then I want to just give a shout out to, of course, Staci. Sorry, Staci, I didn't get your permission.
No, this is great. Thank you. You don't ever have to ask.
Okay. So there, Staci's got 2 websites there, and all of her books and accolades and all the things that she's accomplished are on those 2 sites. So please do check her out. And I think that's all I'm going to share. So there we are.
Staci, what kind of dog was that on that book cover?
She's a Yorkie. That's the picture, actually a picture of my dog on the cover.
Okay. Yep, I have a Yorkie Shih Tzu and it looked just like her, so minus the ears.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's the end of our time. I'm going to put this onto my YouTube channel, so if you want to rewatch it later or direct anyone to it, you're more than welcome to. And then I hope you'll join next Sunday for the next one.
I can't wait.
I'll be there.
Yeah,
you better be there, Francis.
Yes, I will be there.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, ladies and Dan, and we'll see you next Sunday.
All right. See you guys next week.
Bye.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye, Staci.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
Staci.
All right. There.